Okay, so we had Pasuk Hey, Vayim Tzuz Adoni Bezeq, Lebezek, Adoni Bezeq and Bezek. They lachmu bo, they hit, they fought him. Like who's the kind of busy, and then they beat the Canaan people who were in the city. Vayonis Adoni Bezeq, Adoni Bezeq ran away. Vayilu Fu Achrav, they pursued him. Vayochazu Oso, and they seized him, and they did a very very strange thing to him. Kutzos Bahonas Yodav Raglov, they cut off his thumbs and his big toes. Now, this is a Mida Kneg Mida, plus the science says to him, Adoni Bezeq. Adoni Bezeq said, Shiv Imlachim Bahonos Yedem Ragleim Kutzotzim. I had 70 kings whose thumbs and big toes were cut off. They would gather food like chickens underneath my table. Kasha Sisi, just like I did, Ken Shilamli Elokim, so do God paid back to me. Vayavu Yivi Yerushalayim. And what Yerushalayim, now Yerushalayim didn't even really exist at that time, right? There was Melchizedek had been a king of Sholem. Yerushalayim was a very, very minor city if it existed at all. I'm not even sure its name had really been changed. It had been changed by Yerushalayim because when David and Melech conquers it later on, it's called the city of Yevusi. So, but nevertheless, they obviously knew at this point Yerushalayim was where everything was going to be. So they obviously brought him specifically to Yerushalayim that he should die in Yerushalayim, supposed to die in Bezeq. Okay, so that's the mom, and then we'll see the Bigdei Shesh on this. Vayonos. Kirosh Nech V'Shoyer. Adoni Bezeq saw, let's see his conquer. Vayikatsu 2. Kachna said Hashem b'dat tom laso. So Hashem gave them this idea to do this thing, which is, it's not in the Torah. We have no Masorah about it. It's out of the blue. We don't have this penalty of cutting off thumbs and big toes, right? It was not a punishment they ever did before, another punishment they ever repeat again as the singularity, one time. It's a little bit against the Malbim is not comfortable with this. He says it's a little bit against the Jewish laws. Killing of the 7 nations when you have to kill them with a scythe is by sword. Not the pain, not to torture them. When we kill people, we don't torture them. If we have halacha, they have to kill people. You have to kill people. They don't torture them. It's a very strange non-Jewish trait. And he doesn't really have a great explanation. The Malbim says Hashem Mida connected Mida. Hashem decided the Bezer should be punished Mida connected Mida right to what he did. That should be done to him. Vayomer, and the Malbim says the pasuk Zion. Vayomer Kir b'Zeh Din Shamayim. Adoni Bezeq was Matzi Kasadin. He recognized the Shemaim Shishim Lo Kamida, so there's payback according to his own Mida. V'yan Hodab Sha'av, and since he conceded his averos, he made a Bigdei. V'yikir on Hashem and recognized the punishment of God. Meis Kedarko B'derech. Interesting, right? He wasn't actually killed. He died, not of natural causes. I don't know if you can say, because he had his appendages cut off, but he wasn't killed. So the mom sees as some sort of reward for his having confessed his sin. From there they went to fight against Shemaim, which they're not successful doing. They were not successful. We're going to see. But that's where they went after he conquered Adoni Bezeq. They figured, okay, now it's time to conquer Yerushalayim, and that's why he died in Yerushalayim because they're on the way to conquer Yerushalayim at the time. So if you take a look at the Bigdei Shesh on page Tes 9, so actually on page Tes Vav at the bottom. Vayal Yehuda Vayitein Hashem Sekani Vaprizibi Yodam Ve'akum Bezeq Ases Alafinish. As a pasuk David. Why the emphasis? It was just like Kanani. Why the emphasis on Prizi? Right? Okay, usually we just identify them as Canaanites, or identify them as individual nations. But why? So why here Prizi? The nearest Goshas Prizi, the emphasis on Prizi, Ba Lavlit Es Midas Haispashtus Haispazusha B'Kanan. Canaan spreads about inappropriately. That's the midah of pritzus as opposed to the midah of tznius. Tznius, modesty, humility, is to be somewhat shy, introverted. Prizus, words are related because scientific are interchangeable, means to be extroverted and always involved with other people, and sometimes that goes over the limit. It's interesting. I myself am really extroverts. I like dealing with people, and I get a special a special pleasure from dealing with people on a regular and very, very broad basis. Um, I appreciate though introverts because I think people who are introverted, people who are more restrained and more internal, they're very often deeper people. And I appreciate so much a married introvert. My wife is introverted, so it's interesting because like anytime we have to. She spends a long time in other people's company. Of course, she has to do that. And she does a good job. So then afterwards, she needs to decompress because that's it's not something which she's used to. That's not she's used to, but not something which is her ideal. Because I get a thrill out of being interacting with other people. So, but there's a problem, right? Somebody who's too much mufuzar and mufurad, as Haman said about the Jewish people. So then there are deficits to that, and the idea of being perused is very often the opposite of being sanua, of being honest, modest, and humble, and also be able to safeguard myself from the inappropriate behavior which the Canaanim were involved with, which is pizzas. So, and I write here, Ach b'shem hamakom Bezeq. Also, the name of the place, which is Bezeq, Shema nachnu heidmo social Canaan. We hear the echo of the character of Canaan. L'oshna Mishnah, in the language of the Mishnah, lavzik, when the Mishnah used the language of lavzik, perushol fazer, means to scatter. It's an area of Kuvdal. It says when on particularly cold and icy days in the Beis Hamikdash, they would be mevazek. They would scatter salt on the ramp going up his back, so the Kohanim wouldn't slip. So again, Bezeq has language to spread and to scatter. But Tanakh Matzana, we found in Tanakh Shmuel Aleph Perek Aleph Pasuk Ches, she grilu go rosa suas mi Bezeq. They had to make a lottery there, and the lots were made out of Bezeq. Hirshisham Farshim Dainu Cheres. The Farshim say that was a kli cheres. It's a type of pottery. And then well, let's give parentheses. Yitachen Shishah Zos Shas Milchemes Yilu B'Shimon B'Chnani U Prizi. Could be this time when Yehuda and Shimon were fighting against Knan Prizi. Yehuda was destined Leish Firas Kochim Shel Knan to break. This is the time when they wanted to break the spiritual power of Knan, and that's going to be why they did to Adoni Bezeq what they did. And so Aldera Kli Cheres, just like Kli Cheres, She'ena Takona B'Shvira, the way you Kli Cheres become Tomei, the only way you can fix them, so to speak, the only way you can make them Tor is by breaking them. So Sheken Shiva Amim Loyal Em Takona, Kim Belos Chayakon L'Shama. As in 7 nations, well, they have to be broken. There are 2 ways they can be broken. One way they broke them was by killing them. Let's say Kol Neshama. Other way they could broken is they were Mekayir. You know that Yeshua, when they went into Eretz Yisrael, gave the Canaanim 3 choices. They could either leave, or they could convert, or they could, and convert doesn't mean to be absolute Jews. They could become, Keri Toshel, as long as they keep Shemitz Minach, and agree to live in peace with the Jews, or they could be killed. So, but the Canaanim have to be, if they're going to stay, they have to be broken. Either broken in a positive way by being Megar them, or broken again, making them get a Toshav, Shimon Mitzvahs, or broken negative way by killing them. It's likely like a Kli Bezeq, a Kli Cheres, which is the only way to fix it when it becomes Tomei is to break it. Okay, so now we're going to the next thing which we read today about what they did on Adoni Bezeq. Miloshin HaMikra, from the language of the pasuk, it says over here where it says it's like Adoni Bezeq. So the way the Malbim of the pasuk, it means they smote Adoni Bezeq, and then they smote the Canaanites and the Perizzites who were in that city together with Adoni Bezeq in Bezeq. But if you learn, you can learn the pasuk differently. You can learn the pasuk to mean they found Adoni Bezeq in Bezeq, and they fought him, and through that, by Akusa Kanani Vesaprizi. No, it's Adoni Bezeq is the representative of the Canaanites and the Perizzites. And by killing him, by beating him, by overwhelming him, that was the key to overwhelming the rest of the Canaanim and the Perizzites. Okay, that's it right here. Milashon Hamikra, near Shaidei Lochma be Adoni Bezeq, by finding Adoni Bezeq, by Melech Dafka was the king. He's Gabriel Canaanim. They overcame the Canaanim. Because the power of a nation is focused in its leader. This is something from Reb Tzadok in that Maramokah, that's Sefer Shoftim. Has based on this understanding. You can understand so he knew the torture. You understand the torture should be by Adoni Bezeq, which they carry out Adoni Bezeq. Malbim said how he's kasher bezarusa davar. Malbim had great difficulty with the strangeness of this approach. Shunegani Musay, which is against Jewish customs. Rachmanim ne Rachmanim. You don't cut off people's limbs. Rachmanim. Yon Mamashabir Zes, so see, we already saw the Mama says. Okay, so perhaps he can give another approach here. Batorah Kedosha, Matzanu Shebahona Seidam Raglaim Mofim Bekshelemi Milue HaKohanim. The two primary places we find the thumbs and big toes mentioned are in terms of the Miluim, when Aaron and his children were appointed, they had to put blood and oil on their thumbs and big toes. And when a person is a Mitzorah and becomes Torah, you put blood and oil on his thumbs and big toes. Okay, so we have that ritual in Torah, not cutting them off, but putting blood and oil on them. Ibn Ezra Zal, the Ibn Ezra, Mevaris in Yana Bahonos, he explains the concept of the thumbs, Bekach, as follows. They're the way a person grips the world around him. Right? That's the great thing about opposable thumbs. They give us the possibility of gripping the world. The way the Kohen would grip the world, because he represented the world with his Adoni Bezeq, had to be purified. So putting the blood on the agents of gripping, whether it's the feet or the hands, that purifies his grip symbolically, but perhaps in some spiritual Kabbalistic way. But that's the idea. Let's change the grip of the Kohen. Also, Yachas HaMitzorah, the relationship of a Mitzorah who was doing negative things in the world and being nasty and divisive has to be purified. Also, so we put the blood and oil on his toes and on his big toes and on his thumbs. The way the Canaanites relate to the world had no takana, no ethics in. Perhaps this one-time mitzvah of cutting off Adoni Bezeq's thumbs and big toes was to demonstrate how this type of grip of Canaan on the world was a negative one which had to be destroyed. This was kind of like a spiritual way of fighting the grip of Canaan. Because remember, we said all wars the Jews wage in Tanakh are spiritual wars, besides physical wars, fighting the grip of Canaan on the world and eradicating it. And it couldn't be purified. By a Kohen, you can purify it. By a Mitzorah, you can purify it. By Canaan, you just have to destroy it because their grip on the world was completely negative one. And this way, we can also understand what Adoni Bezeq himself did. Adoni Bezeq ishtadel l'shabed is called kochos harash ba'olam. Adoni Bezeq wanted to get to control all the negative forces in the world. It seemed that he had said 70 kings. 70 in Judaism represents all the nations of the world. Shivim umos, the 70 nations. So Adoni Bezeq wanted to take the grip of all the various different nations of the world and bring them tacha l'shulchano, bring them to his table, the tabosav to his desires, and the bringing to actuality his plots. Who it would seem that his cutting off the thumbs and big toes of the kings. I mean, kishuva, some sort of sorcery. Shaydei zeh, Shayodo through it, he's kabe, which oh, Mikol Umav Umaz Koachach is a subsula. He wanted to suck out from every nation in the way it gripped things and use that Koachatuma of that nation for his ultimate gathering of all the Koachatuma underneath his table, so to speak, underneath his relationship with the world. And to use these powers for his own purposes. Now here on the bottom, Aleph. Here Chacham Echad Shlita. Chacham Echad was a very big time of Chacham. My name Rabbi Zirkin, who died young. He said Shabi Yaakov Ruveni is a pretty medrash. It's a pretty wild one. There's a lot of mystical and cool stuff. And the Yaakov Ruveni in Parsha Yetze Dira Masto So Tanuch. Isa says there that Simanim Shemasa Yaakov LeRachel Shemasa Leah. I don't know if you ever wondered about this. Nobody ever speaks about it, right? It says that the way Leah, Lavan and Leah tricked Yaakov is that the Simanim that Yaakov gave to Rachel, she gave to Leah. So what were these Simanim? Nobody says. So the Yaakov Veni says, "Hayu b'vhonas of Tanuch." It was that Leah was supposed to touch Yaakov's ear, his thumb, and his big toe. And then you know it's Rachel. And Rachel Doveh touch his ear, his thumb, and his big toe, and you'll know, and he'll believe it's me. So, and the Tanuch, the earlobe, or some say the Tanuch is this cartilage inside the ear, if you know exactly what it's called. So that also is part of Taras Mitzorah and part of the I don't know. And the Miluim of the Kohanim. So Ayin Shem HaKesh L'Taras Mitzvah Zikol HaTayvus L'Shem Shamayim Shah Gamli Dal Didan. So the Yaakov Beni says that the symbolism of Rachel and Yaakov is they say, okay, now we're getting married. When you're married, you obviously involve yourself in behavior which is some people use inappropriately, but we're going to uplift this kind of behavior and we're going to live a life of Kedusha. So the idea of Rachel touching these parts of Yaakov was to demonstrate that they were going to live a life of Kedusha in all these ways. Anyway, it's a fascinating thing that he actually connects the Taras Mitzorah and the Miluim Kohen Gadol to the Simanim to Rachel. The Tikkun Razeh, back to the text, in order to fix this evil of Adoni Bezeq, Hamakam Rose Kolashim Umos, which again, since I now gathered all these 70 kings, you want to get all the bad stuff from all the nations of the world. So for that, in order to fight the Tuma and the ultimate Tuma in this world, they have to have Yerushalayim. Aflasi Lavo, even in the eventual future, when the Gula comes. Tikkun Umos, the nations will all be perfected. In other words, all the nations of the world will come to serve Hashem. Right? That's what we say in davening or Shani on Kippur. Yasayu Kulam Lavdecha. All the nations of the world come to serve Hashem. And how they do that? When they come up they're going to come up into Aliyah L'Regel. They're going to come up to Yom Tovim to Yerushalayim, Tili Sukkos. And that's not a coincidence. The specifically particularly Sukkos, because after as much as so the Karbanos of Chag Sukkos, there were 70 bulls. And they represented the 70 nations of the world, and they were kapara for them. So Adoni Bezeq, I guess, had to die. His tomb was too great; it couldn't be fixed. But it was brought to Yerushalayim because in Yerushalayim, that's how we fix it. In other words, remember, we come in Jewish history, something Kameh has to be fought. It's the Koach of Yerushalayim which is used to fight it, and that's why it was brought by them to Yerushalayim to die. When we talk Nevuah, either they had a Nevuah that they knew that Yerushalayim is a special place already. Now they knew it. When we talk Havana, or from some sort of other way of understanding it, Yadu b'nei Yisrael knew Shesham there. B'makom iskashus ha'gedola shemei Yisrael l'aviem shemayim, in this place where there's going to be this tremendous connection between Am Yisrael and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Rak Sham Bekocham and Natzach. Only there they have the capacity to win. In Bamikra Zel Lo B'Tikun, and if now they can fix the nations of the world, Kohen Bashmadan, at least by destroying them. It's according to the powers of the Kohen. So okay, the in the footnote here, I bring down from Reb Tzadok that there's a Reb Tzadok says this is a very, very fundamental Reb Tzadok, very, very worthwhile remembering. He says not only does the past have an impact on us, and that's why we have Shabbos and Yom Tov, which commemorate events in the past and other things, Hanukkah, Purim, but the future also had an impact upon us. It's less of an impact because it didn't happen yet. But things that will happen in the future have an impact upon us. The classic example, it says by Bigdei in the footnote, is that when Avraham Avinu was running after the five Malachim, it says by Yirdof Adon. He pursued them until dawn. And at dawn he stopped. And the Chazal say there was no place called dawn yet. Dawn only came existence later on. But there the Rashi brings down that he sensed in that place that Am Yisrael is going to serve Avodah Zarah. The Shevet Dan took Pesach Micha, the end of Sefer Shoftim, and they brought it there. They set up a place for Avodah Zarah. Also, King Yeravam, many years later, when he split the kingdom, set up golden calves in Dan. So Tashash Koichel. Avraham Avinu sensed this is a place where there's going to be Tumah someday, which is going to be a problem for my descendants. He couldn't pursue the five kings anymore past there. So even future events have an impact on the present. And you said Tzadok says that's when the difference between Rosh Chodesh and other Yom Tovim. There's all the Yom Tovim celebrate the past events which occurred. Rosh Chodesh celebrates the future, an event which hasn't yet occurred. But when it says the end of the Torah, Parsha Chodesh, actually, every Rosh Chodesh is going to be our real or regular Tushon. So he says, Tzadok, the Rosh Chodesh also has impact on the future. On Rosh Chodesh, just like events which already took place have an impact upon us now. Events which will take place have an impact upon us now. Rosh Chodesh, as an real regular event in the future, already celebrated now. Now he says that's why Rosh Chodesh is not a greater Yom Tov as the other Yom Tov, because an event which actually has happened has much of an impact on an event that will happen. So therefore, Rosh Chodesh is a Yom Tov, quasi Yom Tov, not a full Yom Tov, because the event it celebrates hasn't happened yet. And he says, and only Reb Tzadok can say something like this. I don't see it, but Reb Tzadok says it. He says the closer we get to Bias Mashiach, the more Rosh Chodesh becomes the Yom Tov, the more celebrated it comes as the Yom Tov. It's because we're getting closer to the event in which usually Rosh Chodesh will actually reach its the point of its celebration, which is the Aliyah Regal, which take place every month. So he says the closer we get to that, the more Rosh Chodesh becomes the Yom Tov. So evidently, felt it. He felt that Rosh Chodesh was being celebrated as we got later and later in history to even greater extent. So in any event, here too, Yerushalayim had nothing at that point. Mishkan wasn't there, so no Beis Hamikdash, no Malchus Yisrael, but there was a Roshim already in Yerushalayim because of the future. By the way, there's a similar thing, which is, it says that Avraham Avinu, on the Tesla of Nissan, he ate matzahs. Right? What do you mean eat matzahs? It didn't take place yet. But he ate matzahs. So the idea is that, and Yaakov and Yitzchak brought a Korban Pesach. What do you Korban Pesach? So before, right? Is that didn't happen yet. But the idea is that even the future events, which would happen on Tesla of Nissan, Tesla of Nissan, already had an impact at the time of the Avos. And that's the pshat. The Avos being Mekayim, the Torah Shalom Nidon, because the eventual impact of all these things would happen. And that too has a more subtle impact, but also an impact on the present as well. Okay, so they felt sense that Yerushalayim is going to be something special. We got to bring it to Yerushalayim. Okay, let's go back to the text itself. It says here, they Bnei Yehuda fought against Yerushalayim and they captured it and they smote it by sword. In other words, they killed the inhabitants. That's the year and they destroyed the city in fire. So there's a long Malbim here. Malbim says, "Fine, this comes to Yeshua." And wait a minute, what's going on here? It says in Yeshua that it says that the Yevusi who lived in Yerushalayim, they Bnei Yehuda were not able to conquer them. And the people of Yevus sat together with the people of Yehuda until this very day, which means that they lived together. That Yehuda did not conquer the Yevusi. In Tanakh, usually means until the time that Tanakh was put in, the Tanakh was written. The end of Yeshua was written by Shmuel. So therefore, presumably still the time of Shmuel, they were still Yevusim in Yerushalayim. Yehuda didn't fully conquer. Later on, Amar, it says also in Pasuk Chav, it says Yevusi Yoshe B'Shalayim, the Yevusites who live in Yerushalayim, Lo Risha B'nei Binyamin. The B'nei Binyamin had other part of Yerushalayim. In Yerushalayim, the border between Yehuda and Binyamin ran right in the middle of the Beis Hamikdash. So it says the people of Binyamin didn't conquer their part of Yerushalayim. They said Yevusi is B'nei Binyamin, Yerushalayim, Ariyom Hazeh. So what's going on here? It says they conquered Yerushalayim. Udaiti. So I think Adoni Bezeq, Melech Yerushalayim, Yarisham min Chamisha Melachim, Sheitzkab Lo Giva Misham Nafal. This is back in Sefer Shoftim. Adoni Bezeq is not Adoni Bezeq, somebody else. So he was the king of Yerushalayim, and he was one of the 5 kings who gathered to Givon, where Yeshua made the miracle of the sun standing still until they finished the battle. The son of Adoni Bezeq was killed there. They certainly must have had devised strategies to conquer the city. Just like they conquered the cities of the other 5 kings there. And they went when they had the opportunity to go fight. Yehuda was on a foot. Because Yerushalayim, although part of it was in portion of Binyamin, there was this tribute which belonged to Yehuda. So Yehuda also had a vested interest in conquering Yerushalayim. In the lifetime of Yeshua, they couldn't conquer its inhabitants. So Yevusim, they were Yevusim, Yehuda, and they lived among Yehuda. But says the Malbim, not until the time of Shmuel. So at Sof Chai Yeshua Shkasim Sefer. Till the end of the time of Yeshua. Because he wrote a Sefer. After that, Yeshua, the wars arose between them and Yoshua and the people of the city, even though they're living together. Time Yeshua. After Yeshua's death, they got into battles. By Keduasa, they conquered Yerushalayim a year, and they burnt the city Lanosh to punish it on their rebelling and fighting against the Jews. Because that. Never Sagam Shekov Shul, even though they conquered the city. Lokov Shul Samitsuda. They didn't conquer the fortress. Which is called the Fortress of Zion, Shalom Yilkida. Ad Yemei David, who wasn't conquered until the days of King David HaMelech. The Shalom Yishav Gankin Yevusi. In this fortress, also the Yevusi sat. Which like it says, Yehuda Lo Lach Musham, Yehuda did not fight there. It wasn't their portion. So Yehuda, they conquered part of Yerushalayim. But they didn't conquer Mitzudas Sion, and they also didn't conquer, of course, the part of Binyamin. So even though in the part where Yehuda conquered, which is generally understood to be, I don't know how familiar with Yerushalayim, but by Har Sion and southwards, where there's a place they called Ir David. So it's understood that was the first place he was conquered, and perhaps he even conquered that at right times Yehuda. And that's where David HaMelech set up shop. And then eventually he conquered the northern parts of Yerushalayim where the Beis Hamikdash was built. Because the northern part of Yerushalayim is north of where Ir David is. But that came later on. And Bnei Binyamin, they never conquered their part of Yerushalayim. So the Metzuda, it's interesting, the tower at the at the opening of Shariafo today. It's called Mitzudas David. So I don't. It wasn't. It was that fortress that was actually built by the the time of second Beis Hamikdash, much later on, and it wasn't built by David. But evidently there was another fortress somewhere in the middle. A bunch of fortresses in Yerushalayim, and that was when they conquered together with stuff Shem Binyamin. Shomer Shagan Kibusi Kamash Chasi Yehuda Lo Achmu Shem Binyamin Mila Yitzchak Hanam Shem Azamar Lo Rish Bnei Binyamin. It's my Lo Achmu Klau. The Shomer Shabbos Bnei Binyamin Ada Yom Azeshu Atzo Chayishmu. And they, in fact, lived. The Yebusim lived with Binyamin in Yerushalayim till the end of the life of Shmuel. Chukas of Sefer Shoftim, who wrote the Sefer Shoftim. Bezeq Kar L'Divrei Mari, the close to what the word the Barbanel writes. That's Mari is Rabbi Yitzchak Barbanel. That's Ir Sholcho B'Eish, the city they cast in fire. Perish and Farshim Kamo Sholchu Eish Ba'ir means they cast fire into the city. Okay, they don't have to change with it. In other words, as Ir Sholcho B'Eish sounds like they tossed the city into the fire. And the mom said, some people explain that means no, they set the fire to the city. Because you don't toss cities into the fire. And he says that okay, that's you don't need to change because that's poetic license. James says that Gamakama finally later on. They tossed they tossed the Beis Hamikdash into the fire. It's my day to Shochel Sa'ir. Through the fire, they sent the city. Mitzias from existence Ella Eder to the non-existence. Okay, but be as it may, the point is like this: that even though it says that they conquered Yerushalayim, it was a part of Yerushalayim, and it wasn't the main part of Yerushalayim because the place of the Beis Hamikdash was going to be. They didn't conquer too much later on. And that was part of Shevet Binyamin. So the bottom line is, though, that they knew as whatever they could conquer Yerushalayim, they need to bring Adoni Bezeq there and let him die there in order to conquer that Kochos to the extent they're able to conquer them. Okay, and then Bachar Yardu B'nei Pasuk Tes Chayadu B'nei Yehuda Lachem B'Knani Hayod Sheva Har B'Negav Ashvela. They went down to fight against Knani, where the mountains. It says Yardu because Yerushalayim is high, and they went to Yosheva Har. So Hebron is also high, but relative to Yerushalayim, it's like a Yerida. Yerushalayim's always. So by Negev, and then they went to the Negev, Ashvela, and the coastal region, and also finally, this is what we're going to have to come to next week. So now they come to conquer Hebron, and there, Shem Hebron Hebron before it was called Kiryas Arba, and they smote the remaining three giants. Their father, it says there were four giants, Shesh, Chima, and Tamai, and their father, and they actually killed the three giants who had been left alive. Okay, so it's going to cut me off any second, so we'll stop here today. And Mir Hashem will take a pasuk and go on in Mir Hashem next week. Thank you very much. Have a good night, guys. See Mir Hashem tomorrow.
Bye, Rabbi.